I want to talk a little bit about how we can apply zero trust to DLP solutions and how really the DLP market and all the DLP solutions that are out there need to have somewhat of a zero trust renaissance. And what I'm not talking about is how you can apply DLP to a zero trust program or a zero trust strategy. I'm talking about how you can apply zero trust to your DLP solutions, or how vendors potentially should be applying zero trust to their DLP offerings. So where's this coming from? Gartner, they put out a report typically every year. In this one called Gartner Predicts 2025, Managing New Data Exposure Vectors, they talk about DLP. They put a tremendous amount of emphasis on, basically all of the increasing investments in traditional data loss prevention, otherwise known as DLP, that there's still a rising number of data breaches and it's persistent despite having all of these traditional DLP solutions in place. Thus, they suggest we need real-time DLP controls that automatically and adaptively respond to data loss. Or data loss events or data loss activities. So what is traditional DLP? What are the markers of traditional DLP? Well, DLP was initially launched in the early 2000s. You think about some of the early days of endpoint DLP, blocking certain behaviors, the ability to print, the ability to export to a USB drive or some external drive. And then you fast forward and we have new vectors of export that we're looking at. Maybe it's email. And so we start to create different capabilities to prevent or block users from emailing sensitive information or critical data for the organization out through email or through their personal email. Then we fast forward to many other new vectors as chat and Teams, which it's crazy to think about, but there was a time where we did not have the ability to chat. Then we had Skype and Slack and all these new capabilities that were launched, and then we had new DLPs and new solutions and new policies within each of those solutions to protect and block from sensitive information leaving the organization through that particular application or new data flow. And so traditional DLP is somewhat of a whack-a-mole where you're trying to create new policies or configure existing ones to basically tackle each new application, each new endpoint, where you have managed and unmanaged devices. So you have to have a policy for each one. You have policies for hundreds of managed apps in the org and thousands of unmanaged apps that get created on a regular basis. You have policies for risky users and non-risky users, and then additional policies to define what is risky. And then you have, DLP policies for tagged or labeled data, and then different policies for untagged or unscanned data, or policies for supported and unsupported file types. There's so many different policies. It's a lot. It's very onerous. And so that is traditional DLP in a nutshell. So if you harken back to the early days when zero trust, where we wanted to verify explicitly and also to just assume breach. So at every entry point, we want to apply multi-factor authentication. We want to make sure that that user is who they say they are. We want to only give them just-in-time access or just enough access, and we want to assume breach at every authentication point. But then what I am proposing and what you'll see in the Gartner report is that we need to be continuously checking post-authentication. So even if Shawn is able to share information or share data through this particular data flow or this particular export vector, we need to make sure that we are continuously monitoring what is actually going through that particular vector, what is going through that particular path or flow. And also, too, if we see that some of that is anomalous or see that some of it is not exactly how we intended, that we can adaptively change the policies without creating another task for security teams to go and configure, or maybe it's a change in the organization. So you have a particular user that's been moved, or maybe a new team is being developed, and so now that new team has need for different access to different types of data within the organization, that we can adapt our DLP policies to those changes within the organization. You also may have new features. So Teams, there was once upon a time where in Microsoft Teams, you couldn't record a meeting and transcribe it and then have AI then reason over that transcription and be able to summarize the meeting and do all these types of things that we can nowadays. But as those new features are added to like Microsoft Teams, we need to be able to continuously adapt our DLP policies for new things, because then all of a sudden a Teams meeting that once was just live interaction, live exchange of data, now includes a recording. And that recording needs to have possible, DLP on it, so that way the recording can't be shared or exported in some way. Or maybe the transcription, we want to also to be able to protect that. And also to protect how AI is reasoning over that video or that transcription. So all of these things DLP needs to adapt to. And the reason it needs to adapt to it, again, is to apply zero trust. To assume that even though we're saying these particular users can share this type of information, when things occur and changes happen, we need to continuously see if there is an insider risk, see if there's a threat. Another reason we need to apply zero trust to DLP is we need to be continuously assuming breach and monitoring activity, because we've seen time and time again, there's a lot of threat actors out there that will use very complicated schemes and paths to do an export. So they may download a file locally and then upload that file to a trusted third-party app. Maybe it's Slack, maybe it's Box, and then maybe there's an AI agent associated with that app that is now a new feature of the technology, and they'll use that AI agent to create, to summarize that file that was, again, downloaded locally on the endpoint, then loaded to a third-party app, approved, sanctioned activity by the organization, but then through the new native AI tool is able to then create a new version based off of that original file, and then they'll take that file and upload that AI generated unmarked file to some private cloud storage owned by the hacking group. So they can create all of these very complicated data flow paths that we need to notice, that we need to detect, and then we need to adapt to. And the only reason we would be detecting that particular activity is if we're taking a zero trust approach. That even if some of these paths are acceptable, we're seeing how users are using those existing paths, because we're assuming that there is a breach happening. We want to verify each flow explicitly. In summary, zero trust DLP tracks where data originates, how it transforms, and where it ends up, while assuming that each step in the lifecycle is compromised. This approach helps in identifying potential vulnerabilities and unusual data access patterns that lead to accelerated containment and data breach prevention.